Welcome, everyone. Ari and I are here today to discuss the final house and sign of this Uranus series. It's just been a joy moving through these houses and signs together with the nature of Uranus and how we experience it in our life. And Ari, it looks like you have a new painting behind you. It looks like the third eye or something.
That's Michelle's. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's so Piscean. It's perfect. Anyway, it feels very
Let it
much.
be.
You can move it over. I like
I don't
that.
know how in process. I'll just let it be where it is. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, we've come all the way around the wheel. And so today we're going to discuss the nature of Uranus and Pisces, or the 12th house, what that feels like, what it looks like in the world. We have chart examples, of course. And, so much about Pisces connects to that timeless, seamless, boundless realm where anything is possible, right? Or it can be anything from just massive fame for somebody to just energy linked with, I think, untapped potential, brilliance. And Pisces is a water sign. There can be events that occur for that soul linked with water, which we have some very specific examples to talk to you about today. And being that Pisces is the third of the three water signs and it's deeply emotional, oftentimes when I see Uranus and Pisces, somebody can be detached a bit from their emotional body because of potentially trauma that they have experienced in their life. That can also play out in that way. But at the same time, with Uranus and Pisces, it can be somebody who is tuned in and tapped in to other realms. It can just reflect such a brilliance and such an intelligence of someone who's far ahead of the time, somebody that might be really like a flashlight for all of us to look into these other realms and places. What do you think about when you just imagine Uranus and Pisces or the 12th house?
Well, I'll say first. So when we think about the 12th house Pisces archetype, it corresponds to everything that is. Everything manifests it points to the nature of the source itself. So it's one of those archetypes that it's both a singular archetype and it also represents all of the archetypes. It's
Yes,
everything is
exactly.
included within it. So really grasping and appreciating that the 12th house Pisces speaks to our relationship to ultimate reality and ultimate meaning. And a core facet of this archetype is going to be where we each look for or find ultimate meaning. Um,
Mhm.
and and it's not like a philosophy, it's that which we're trusting. It's like the fish trusts the water, and within all beings there's by the nature of who we all are of the oneness. We all come from the same place. The truth is the truth for everyone. And so there's this piece within us that's yearning to remember that and to find something that's essentially meaningful and real. Like, I think of reality with a capital R. A lot of people think of reality as like Saturn, but reality with a capital R, that's Pisces 12th house, right? And so we're all surrendering to something, and we all need to give meaning or find meaning in life in some way. And this is where a big issue with the 12th house or Pisces is, where we can displace ultimate meaning on that which isn't meaning, or it's temporal. So it can be a relationship or an experience or something showing up in life, and it's all just a sandcastle. Like, the waves come and say, nope, that had no meaning. Nothing really on its own has any meaning. When we're looking at the archetype of Uranus in the 12th or Pisces, it's all of the forward thinking ideals and um, capacities of human intelligence. Like, we could have it from the perspective of this idealization, 12th house, of a humanity where we all live together in this perfect utopian way. And all people of all walks of life get together and love each other and respect each other and include each other. And so there can be this sort of idealism and also naivety. And then it's the reality of people being where they are, humanity being what it is. groups of people are trying to overtake other groups of people, there isn't this universal quality of inclusion and caring. So there can be this trusting quality in wanting to trust that we can all get along, but then being constantly, this is an issue with the 12th house where we can feel like something greater than ourselves is constantly weighing, pushing us down, or knocking us around, constantly being duped or taken it. We can feel incredibly vulnerable and small and almost like insignificant. And that's where it's like our love and our hope and our ideals, they can be so great, but it leads to a disillusionment when no amount of hope or wishful thinking or indiscriminate trusting can lead to this utopian perfect world. And this can lead to another dynamic within the 12th house, which is a sort of existential distrust in reality. I feel so fundamentally vulnerable and almost like abandoned by life itself, because all of my expectations, higher octave of Venus, Neptune archetype, right? Our expectations of reality itself, our expectations of what we wanted God to be, of what we wanted life to be for us on our terms and our thinking, it doesn't do that. And so we're disillusioned and we can be disappointed and disheartened. And that can be a very, very, very hard place to be, where that which we've given meaning is not there for us. And it can really lead to sort of either nihilism or like almost this underlying resentment towards life, towards God, towards reality, and a turning cold, turning totally disconnecting, and you're saying dissociating from life itself. So we could have a sort of distrust in the state of humanity, or the whole world is going down. We haven't taken care of the world. It's all gonna be horrible. We're all gonna, we're just insignificant species in the scope of everything, and it doesn't matter what you do, and people aren't gonna ever care for each other. Really, these are all different ways in which the individual soul is trying to reconcile with the question of existence and suffering, and where bad things happen to good people, and that the deeper knowing of love and truth, it seems to always exist in contrast to what we're experiencing as fear and disunity. So those are a couple of the pieces that can really emerge with the 12th house in Uranus and the 12th house in general. What might you add to that?
Sometimes it's really hard to grasp even words. I think, listening to you talk about it too, because it is everything that is invisible but accessible. So we trust that it's there. Just if you have a connection to spirit, to God, and you feel that connection, you can feel it there, but it's invisible. It's not tangible. You can't really touch it. And I think a lot of times when people do go through something really traumatic, it's easy to feel victimized by the event and to think, where was God, and why wasn't I saved, or why wasn't that person saved? And it can really create a fracturing in one's beliefs in God or beliefs in something greater. But I kind of have this funny little story I want to share, because it was you were mentioning this, and it reminded me when my kids were growing up. My daughter in particular loved this little cartoon called Oswald, and he was an octopus, and all the different characters, like there's a penguin, there's a daisy, there's all these different characters in this cartoon. And so they're at the beach and they're having a sandcastle building contest. All, the Egg Brothers and the Daisy and all these different groups of people, and they're all building these unique sandcastles. And Oswald, this big octopus, enormous one, was really bummed out because he's having to judge each person's individuality, right? Each person's creation, their sandcastle. And he was really stressing out about it because he just is so Libran in nature. And all of a sudden this tidal wave comes out of the ocean and just crashes on everybody's creations, individual creations, and all this sand comes together and forms this unique, just one unique sand creation. And Oswald says, everybody wins. So it's this, you talk about that we're all part of something. We're all part of something greater, and yet we feel separate. We feel, and it was to teach a child, this in this particular cartoon, that we are connected, and it's such a beautiful thing to be able to celebrate this victory together, that we all win. We are all part of this creation, and we all part of this creation. We have our own individual fingerprint, and we have our own individual contribution, but to never forget that we are all connected.
Mm.
And when we are all connected, everybody does win. It's not an us versus them mentality. So
This
go ahead.
this brings up an important piece with this archetype. So we're looking at unity with Pisces 12th house, and then Uranus is sort of the apex of individuality, not personality, but the individuality of the soul, our unique vibration. And this can get confusing. There's a natural semi-sextile between the Aquarius Pisces archetype. So we could have one delusion or point of confusion where it's sort of a homogeneous. And this could be, the ideal form of the human species is this evolved state of being where we all act or live this way. And it can be this ideal of something that seems evolved or evolutionary, but actually is, in a sense, suppressing individuality, just as much as it can be this particular idea that particular forms of intelligence are in some way superior to the entirety of creation itself. And it reminds me very much, your story reminds me of the Tower of Babel. It says, I'm going to reach God through human intellect and capacities. This is the issue. It's like the genius of our individual nature. And you can think of Uranus in general as being genius, as being our capacity to apprehend and embody higher intelligence. And yet, even the intelligent design of creation, even if we are able to apprehend the algorithmic design of existence, we still wouldn't touch existence. Like, existence is present moment, and it's so embedded in our true unity. It's a thing to love and surrender, whereas the algorithm is a profound computing capacity that certain brains that can apprehend greater karmic patterns and dynamics are able to do. So even at the greatest height, and I think about Atlantis, right? The nodes of Neptune corresponding to that. At the height of human intelligence, our downfall is when we idealize our genius so much. And it's like the Tower of Babel reflects that story. We're going to build something to reach God, and then everyone gets individuated. All in the story, as I remember it, we get all these different languages, and suddenly we're not able to communicate with each other anymore. And I think the true unity of Uranus in the 12th is unity in diversity, not in a way that makes any kind, like, not in a way that waters it down, but like a true understanding that the intelligent design of creation is a perfect ecosystem that operates in perfect unity according to the mind of God. And there can be this devotion in it. But in that devotion, there's a sort of objectivity and a neutrality that keeps the soul from projecting its ideals and stories and conceptions. Because you can go to the extreme of having a whole superior race of people, which we see that. We see, I mean, Hitler had Uranus in the 12th house in Libra. You could have this whole idea of here's a superiority form of the human species. Groups of people, Uranus being groups of people that have been entirely annihilated, subdivisions of society that have been just sort of pushed out of existence almost. That's also Uranus in the 12th house, where you become a nobody. So the greater divinity of that is, oh, you're muted. The greater divinity of that is how intricate and divine every facet of creation is, as it is.
Yeah, it can create this feeling of being isolated or alienated or invisible in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say, for sure.
Yeah.
I love that unity and diversity, a like-mindedness because we are all different.
Yep.
We are the same because we are all so different.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, I just thought university.
Oh yeah.
In diversity.
That's
University.
what happens in the university. Nobody's alike. At least
Yeah.
the one I went to.
Yeah.
There was such diversity. All right. Well, Would you like to start diving into charts and we can elaborate more on these archetypes?
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot more we can jump into.
All right.
Share the screen here. So here's the beautiful image that you found. This freaks me out. I'm like,
Yes, it
does
freaks
this
me
guy
out.
know what he's doing?
Yeah.
But this, this definitely reminds me of just the Uranus is the individuated unconscious. 12th house Pisces is the totality of existence. So we have almost like the bridge between our stored soul memories and like the greater collective arc of all of existence. And this is where we can access these universal archetypes and symbolism that is profoundly transpersonal. We could even, this is one thing really worth pointing out, just the possibility of total insanity with Uranus in the 12th house, or total illumination. Insanity being there's taking, for example, the situation of total idealism and being duped or taken advantage of, and losing faith in humanity. There can be a sense of, I don't know how to trust other people. Everything feels, sirens passing, the state of life feels so overwhelming to me. I don't even know how to function within it. Like there can be a total break from reality where then everything is sort of seen as this like hyper objective, universal, impersonal symbol. And like one can like dissociate and live in abstract concepts entirely, like living entirely in abstraction, where it just doesn't make sense anymore. Like everything is an algorithm, everything is an archetype, and there's no connection to the present moment in that way. Or we can have this profound illumination where a person really wakes up. We see that this world is but a dream. And that in a dream, when you have a dream, you have symbols. You don't take the symbols literally. They represent elements within the individuated unconscious that are being liberated. And one can have this illuminating realization of this is all symbolic. None of this is literal. It's all on the inside. So just wanted to share that.
Mm. Okay, so this is Cecilia, who is not quite 20. And we did change the name to protect her. And Cecilia was a victim of the Montecito mudslides in 2018, I believe it was. She did survive it. And she is a survivor. Look at that Taurus sun with Mercury in the North Node. And it was really a horrific event. I think something like 17 people died in this mudslide. What was happening is that there was massive fires in Santa Barbara, and then it rained. And when everything burns and becomes ash, then the earth obviously is loose. And then there's a neighborhood over there near a watershed that was owned by the Department of Water and Power. And I don't really know exactly what happened, mismanagement of the land or things that were going on after the fires to protect the area. But 1 minute, this family was sitting in their living room together, and the next minute, massive mud was coming through their front door and they're everywhere, their windows, and they were running for their life. Now, the whole neighborhood knew that there was, they had their car in the driveway and they were ready. They were on their way out, getting ready to actually leave, within the next hour, because they were told that they had to evacuate, right? And so everything came faster than expected. And this girl's father died immediately. Her brother was washed away, and her mother as well was washed away, but survived the incident. And I'm going to talk a bit about her in a moment. She's written a book about the ordeal. So The only two survivors from this family was this daughter, this girl and her mother. And there were other victims that did not make it in the neighborhood. Devastating. I will tell you this, that I remember Jeffrey said to me once, there are things I will never understand. Things that happen to children, or events that happen to people. And this is one of those stories for me. It is absolutely the most devastating event, traumatic event, Uranus and Pisces in the 8th house. In all of my years of doing this work as a mother, imagining losing my son and my husband, and your family is literally cut in half, and their animals, everything. So what I want to talk about with this chart is that Uranus is squaring her nodes, and it is in a waning square. It's moved beyond the square already, but you can tell for lifetimes that she's experienced a lot of trauma, even linked with water. She's got Neptune and Mars balsamic in Aquarius. The ruler is Uranus, and Pisces in the 8th. Neptune rules Pisces, right? She even has Jupiter and the moon balsamic in Leo, opposing those 2 points. Let's take it even further. The north node of Neptune, which is the ruler for Pisces, is conjunct her moon and her Jupiter, and the south node of Neptune is conjunct her natal Neptune, conjunct that Mars. So when you were showing that tidal wave, I mean, this is just bigger than you. And I'll tell you what, a thing that is so incredible, and I just learned this today. The mother actually is a friend of mine, and that I knew long before I was an astrologer. And when this girl was getting confirmed, she chose the name Cecilia. And I also learned in my early studies that through Jeffrey that, when we are all shown what our life is going to be like. And so that's why a lot of times when we experience that deja vu feeling, we've seen it before. So of course her soul knew what was going to happen, and I'll tell you why. She chose the name Cecilia when she was confirmed. And Cecilia is, oh gosh, I want to come back to that description because there's an important piece to this. Cecilia was being buried alive by the mud, and it was rising, and she had found a place, some pocket close to the house, I believe, in her case. And she had found this pocket of air, and she was running out of air because the mud was still rising. And she was singing. That's how she survived the ordeal. She was singing, I Dream a Dream, which is from Les Miserables. And if you know the words, it's all about a broken dream. I dream the dream that was taken from me. But so she was practicing for the musical that she wanted to try out in or audition for. And she was singing, and that's how she survived, not completely losing it. She just went to music, which is the Taurus energy as well. Taurus is linked with music, and is what gave her the courage just to fight for her life. Venus is in Aries. So she was fearless in the face of her death while she was singing. I mean, she literally tapped into some other realm. And I want to share now too, remember 7 years old is when she got confirmed, and she was 13 or 14 years old when this occurred. Saint Cecilia teaches us that she is not only the patron saint of music, but an example of trusting in the Lord's plan and being fearless even in the face of death. That was the saint that she chose when she got confirmed at 7 years old, which is the first Saturn square, of course, that we encounter and when we're growing up and facing reality. So it was subconsciously, she knew what was ahead of her. And she's been through, I mean, you can see lifetimes of trauma with the symbols that I pointed out to you. The mother actually, just to share this point, this part of the story, she traveled for a mile or more within the mud and was tossed. She was tossed up on some pile of, I don't know, something that had torn apart, wood and beams and boulders, and she was just plopped on top of that and had many broken bones, etc. So these two girls are survivors. And so anything you want to point out besides those main signatures that I was sharing, Ari?
Well, just acknowledging, since we have the nodes and the outer wheel, we have Lucifer also right there on that Uranus, right? So this is a soul that is also here to, and it's interesting, I think Anne Frank also had Lucifer in Pisces in the 8th, right? Or at least one of the nodes of Lucifer. Yeah, there's something healing and inspiring that is, I think, a part of her soul path. But if we look at this Pisces in the 8th house, it's liberation from impermanence. That's sort of the theme here. Like Pisces in the 8th house is really about the eternity of the soul. And sometimes it's harder for us to understand when these kinds of archetypes are involved. Like you were saying, like, why do these kinds of things happen to people so young? But we can see from a very objective angle that it's part of this soul's ongoing journey of awakening to realize the eternal nature of the soul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So just acknowledging that. And I think there's something very, very healing and powerful. And I probably with Lucifer up there too, it's like to not be disheartened by this, to not be disheartened by loss, and to recognize that these are all changes that are happening in form, but there's something eternal that lives on.
It's amazing too, because we think about the material world, we think of the earth signs or Saturn, we think of the material things, and this is just so literal, but their personal items were found in like 2 cities away.
Wow.
Or just all over the place. Like the most random things were discovered, and they'd be brought to the different families. There things in their filing cabinets were just spewed all over the place. I mean, private things, personal things, everything. So when you talk about impermanence or non-attachment, really, to things, I was part of it. But I mean, what I'm seeing here too is, as I've mentioned, that in other lifetimes she's experienced a lot of sudden separation, sudden loss from in family situations. You can see that with the Moon Mars opposition and devastating events. And I mean, it feels like it's all involving water everywhere I look. I don't really know the stories in the past. I can just tell that they've been devastating. And what happens to the soul when you experience trauma, in order to survive, you detach. It's almost like it's not your story. You're just watching your life like you're watching a movie. You're not in it. You're just watching it. And that's how you learn to survive, separated from it, separate from it. So part of what needs to happen for her in this life is to emotionally re-enter the memories and re-enter every piece and part of her past that she can, in order to, because we are forced back into the trauma in order to heal it. And because of other lifetimes already experiencing this and coming into this life with so much unresolved trauma, with Uranus squaring the nodes and the moon opposing Mars and Neptune, she had to recreate this on some level, because there was an emotional arrestment that occurred because of the trauma. Or maybe she just waved the right flag. I give up. Uranus and Pisces square the nodes in other lifetimes. She could have just checked out,
Right.
And that was probably likely one or more of the events. I mean, honestly, who could survive that if you think about it? However, she knows that her mom's still here, and the mom obviously is, this is all she's got left, right? So there's that team of energy, this bonded energy that really they need to lean on each other in order to continue on. And so I really, what I was sharing with mom is just that everything is coming full circle in this life. I looked at the position of Uranus. I'm looking at these culminating energies, and that the intention and your daughter's intention is to literally bring all of this full circle and move forward and not recreate it ever again. So knowing the why with the South Node in Scorpio, knowing the why, being able to uncover why this happened, why me, why my family, what am I supposed to do with this? And inevitably, I see this soul as being someone to help others with unresolved trauma, with hideous things that have happened to them. And, you know, like anything, if you know a therapist or a counselor or a trauma,
Right.
well, a trauma worker in any respect, if you know they've been through something like you have, then there's just, it changes the dynamic and it changes how you can help that person. So, you know, obviously she's still young and she's got a lot of healing to do herself, but I do feel like that is going to be the way to her own healing, is to be able to take her story to help others. Her mom, I just wanted people to know, is coming out with a book about the whole story called Where Yellow Flowers Bloom. And it will be launched, it'll be out on Amazon on Mother's Day this year. And so she shares a lot of more detail in that story.
It's worth noting too that, I mean, so often souls that either have great psychic capacity, great therapeutic gifts, or just higher levels of consciousness and intelligence at all stages of evolution, right? I mean, just those that are really tuned in to just more refined levels of intelligence. It's often the result of trauma, of having been through really hard experiences. And from a spiritual angle, sometimes the greater evolutionary purpose or gift underneath them is that it frees us up from the small mind. It makes us available to something much broader, much larger, more essential, more true. From an awakening point of view, this is so common. I mean, so often essential times of spiritual awakening and realization come just after these profound traumatic periods. And in a way, Uranus and Pisces, it's like it doesn't care about what's lost. It's so dispassionate. It's all just a sandcastle. And it can feel so personal. And I mean, it often feels that way because we can say as a human it is. But there is something deeper. As we integrate and heal it, as we rise above our story about it, we begin to see the greater unfolding within consciousness. And it can be incredibly profound, not to be taken lightly. The possibility for awakening often happens at the heels of these kinds of events that the human identity can't quite process.
Well,
It's like waking up from a bad dream and then realizing, okay,
that's exactly right.
What's liberating in this symbology?
The dream is real. That's her Saturn in the 12th house. It's waking up from a bad dream and realizing it's your reality. It's real. And so I mean, like so many people that do use their own traumas to help other people, I think that's the only way that you truly are able to put the pieces back together again, you know, and to feel useful in the world. And I know that when you step out of your own story to help another, it helps any soul who's suffering from something. But you know, yeah, you talked about not attaching to the loss. I mean, it's because you have no choice.
Right, exactly.
Lost, I mean, literally everything. So at some point, when somebody experiences this, you know, inevitably the question will be why. There's got to be a reason for it. We all know that subconsciously. One thing I'm encouraged by, I know while Uranus is still really activating her chart right now through the contact to her Mercury and the Sun, it can take a while when somebody's been traumatized like this to really start to deal with it. You can be frozen for a while and not ready. And so sometimes when these transits come back to activate the memories, I'll share too that her brother's body wasn't found for three years or something after the fact. They were searching for it, and he was finally found. The mother wanted to put him to rest next to his father and her husband. So, that can kind of make you hold your breath until, even though the soul is not inside anymore, you're still holding on to something. And so what I'm encouraged by, though, is that Pluto currently is forming just beautiful angles to her nodes. And I'm really hoping that in the next year to a year and a half, it will be a time that you can feel like she can finally move on as well. So this is honestly the worst case I've heard in my life as an astrologer. This story is heartbreaking. And yet, the subtitle of this book is A True Story of Hope Through Unimaginable Loss. Is where the mom comes to.
Wow.
Where yellow flowers bloom was the area where they ultimately found her son's body and this girl's brother in a field where yellow flowers were blooming.
Wow.
So I don't know about you, Ari, but there's always somebody worse off and someone better off than you. And you just look around in the world, there's always someone that's been through something far worse than you might be going through at some point in time, or what have you. And it just is such a perspective changer. And I'm just so inspired by my friend, and I'm inspired by this story and her daughter's fight to continue on as well. I can't think of anything worse.
Just to say one more thing, not to project this on Cecilia, but very common with Uranus and Pisces, in particular, you put it in the 8th house, we can really access the dimension of reality that is free of form and limitation. So souls that can communicate with dead people. I mean, just straight up, the ability to relate to reality beyond the veil of impermanence. And sometimes these are the greater gifts that, kind of like I was saying before, that await us. But it's like in our letting go of our attachments to the form and to the conditions that we're so familiar with, what's revealed beyond that is more of reality. So I just wanted to offer that perspective too. So many souls with Uranus and Pisces have these antennae to life, to consciousness beyond this planet, angels, other forms of content. It's expansive. And you put that in the 8th house in particular, there can be a real profound connection to the soul and to the soul's evolutionary journey, and this ability to recognize our unity as souls when we're not so fixated on the body.
Yeah. I mean, like, one last thing about this chart too. Well, one last thing is just that when you're looking at something so extreme through the paradigm, through these oppositions, the contacts to south and north nodes of planets like this with Neptune involved, I mean, it repeats. But Pluto is trining Venus in her natal chart in Earth houses. This is rebuilding. Venus rules her north node, it rules her sun, it rules her Mercury in the 11th house, being able to look objectively at what has happened and to survive it and to transform because of it. So that is the hope in this chart that lies within it.
Great observation. Okay, Nostradamus, so worth mentioning. Kind of like I was saying about this capacity to see, right? If you think of Uranus as objective seeing, you're going to climb the mountain and look over. Let's, in the 12th house, say that the mountain is existence and you're looking at it from a point of view that is unbound by form, unbound by time and space. And there's, a very interesting teaching in the Talmud called aspacleria. Aspacleria, literally, it's an Aramaic term that refers to aspacleria, a clear looking glass, or like a window, right? And they have two ideas. There's aspacleria meira and aspacleria she'ena meira. It's a clear looking glass, and then a tinted, like the kind of glass you would find at a church. Most people's prophecy are the tinted glass, right? It's going to happen through the filter of our own subjective thinking, which is going to point back to our own evolutionary limitations. Most people's vision isn't perfectly clear. So long as our minds aren't perfectly clear, we're not going to access pure vision and seeing. So most prophecy, it has a little bit of subjective filter, and it's very rare where you'll have aspect claria meira, like pure, clear window looking glass. That's, you can say, the highest levels of consciousness, perhaps. So he's an example of, looking through a tainted window, you get these prophecies through these symbolisms, and it's very abstract. It's coming through in particular ways. You would say with the Uranus, you're not necessarily controlling. He would look at a flame, as I understand it, and receive these visions. It's a state of receptivity to what's entering into his consciousness, coming from the higher mind. And then it needs to be translated and communicated in some form. It's interesting as well. He has, Mercury retrograde in Capricorn conjunct the Sun at the inferior conjunction. He wrote all of this stuff down. And he's well known for all of his writing. Very concrete. Oh, interesting. I just realized Uranus Vesta. Yeah. He would look into a candle and get the prophecy.
Really? That's so cool. Look at that. So
Yeah.
literal.
Yeah. It couldn't be more literal there. So I just thought he's a good example. And you hear two facets of it. Uranus, of course, speaking to the future. It's always going to point to a level of consciousness that can't be apprehended within the mainstream consensus reality. He was ahead of his times. Even he was a Jew, by the way, that his parents, they changed the name to make him look, it's, during the Inquisition time. You don't want to be Jewish during that time in general. But he studied Kabbalah. He studied Jewish mysticism. He was a proponent of the world being heliocentric at a time when that wasn't very popular. So he was very radical, and he spoke the truth, and that was a big deal. And he traveled a lot seeking knowledge. It squares this Pluto and Sag in the ninth house. He was a truth seeker and a truth speaker. Yeah. But these kinds of souls are often ahead of their time, and usually what's being brought forward can't even by themselves be understood or translated according to their subjective, because when you access a future seeing, you have to really be so outside of your own conditioning to be able to apprehend it. Anything you want to add to this chart?
I mean, there's just it's the way everything is aligned makes it's so clear about his ability to peer into other worlds or even to predict things, just in terms of timelines as well, with all the Capricorn. But he's got that really powerful grand trine between Uranus and the moon. The moon rules all those fourth house planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. Those are all retrograde, with Mercury retrograde as well. I mean, that's quite a powerful energy, and just in terms of just the psychic sense, his emotional attunement to these things, his being a visionary for things, and again linked with these timelines as well. Pluto's sextiling his Venus in Aquarius. I mean, that is just, those are things just storming into him out of the blue, right? The truth is just like in a flash, basically. And just, yeah, a tremendous psychic sense. It's all, he's just wired. He was wired to be able to see and to know. And of course, nobody's going to be believing him or,
Right.
thinking he's crazy. And, so that's what you get for being ahead of the times, I suppose. But yeah, excellent chart for that.
Reminds me too. So the nature of projection placed in the 12th house, people take his prophecies and they love applying it towards, oh, this prophecy was about this experience. Like he was prophesizing what would happen when I leave the bathroom in the year 2018. Like there's like 2019, like any year, there's an ability to take these very abstract universal archetypal messages that might be speaking on a very broad level, and then to personalize it according to our own illusions or dreams or ideas. And I see all the time on the internet, if you Google it, Nostradamus's devastating predictions for 2022.
Oh no, really?
He predicted that you would get that paper cut It's just like there's that that tendency, we see that with, you know, Jesus as well. Anyone that's speaking in such broad universal terms will all their words will also be taken in that way. So
Yeah, great one. It's a great one.
I had to give this guy some airtime.
You are attached to this one.
I'm just excited about it because I love the trilogy, the Matrix trilogy. I don't know much about Keanu Reeves, and I did not research it much, so I'm just going to be very honest about that. But I was excited to find out that he has Uranus in Virgo in the 12th house. All I'm going to do is speak about the Matrix for a couple minutes right now, because we often know that a soul's personal chart is very much reflected in like the big cinematographic, whatever that word is, roles that they play in their lifetime. I see this time and time again, that there's a synchronistic nature here. Uranus and Virgo in the 12th house, you have the entirety of the human species being slaves, Virgo, to the Matrix, and they're actually all living in this stimulated dream reality. And the figure Neo wakes up to this almost like Judeo-Christian replay. He's the chosen one and is here to save the human species from the Matrix, you know, and it's being in service to some kind of higher ideal and purpose. I mean, the symbology of the Matrix, if you take it in spiritual terms, is wakening our minds from the illusions that we are living in. We can think of it of the social conditioning all around us, but even just the illusion that this world is real, realizing that this itself is a dream reality. And we have these Christ-like figures that come into the world, they incarnate and they show up to teach us about the truth, to teach us forgiveness, to teach us to question the seeming realness. So when he wakes up in the Matrix, he realizes that he could fly. 12th house. He's not limited. He's not a slave to the Matrix because Uranus woke up from the algorithm, from the stimulation, saw it was all a stimulation, and was able to transcend 12th house, the limitations and it's interesting, it's opposite Saturn and Pisces in the 6th house. Again, it's like transcending the limitations of form. I'm a human form meant to be in this kind of experience. I'm working this 9 to 5 boring job, got to show up for the, you know, all of these symbols are in the Matrix movies. So it's just a really cool example. If you want to understand Uranus in the 12th house, watch the Matrix. That's all I got to say.
I think flying is 11th house, Mars in the 11th.
Oh, you are absolutely, well, flying is 11th house, you're right. Flying would be 12th house from the point of view of transcending the limitations of time and space.
And true, because you put Uranus in there, and that's a ruler natural.
Right, there we go. Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
But flying and heights in general is 11th house.
All right.
Like having, you know, I know people, for example, Uranus in the 12th, people that fly in their dreams.
Oh, yeah.
They dream and they're free. They can travel, they can fly, they can do anything they want to do because they're not limited by the illusion as much as they are when they're in this physical world.
Yeah.
Astral projection, things like that too. Madonna, you start this one.
I just thought of something.
Yeah.
My daughter, before when I guess she was still a toddler, but she used to tell me when she would wake up smiling in the morning, just sitting there in her crib, sucking her thumb, waiting for me to come get her. Wouldn't even cry, just smiling. I'm like, wow, where did you go in the night? I played Candyland in the clouds. So she has a Neptune and Aquarius trining Jupiter in the 12th in Gemini. So she doesn't have Uranus in the 12th, but she has Neptune and Aquarius trining Jupiter in the 12th. Yeah. Anyway, so she had lots of stories for me. She flew around to a lot of cool places. Pretty awesome. Okay, Madonna. So obviously she's known as the queen of pop. And, I didn't know this. I was reading about her that she originally wanted to be a ballerina, which just cracked me up when I read that. There's something about her that reminds me so much of Gaga.
Gaga was so inspired by her. Yeah.
Yeah. But just this absolute rebellion of traditional culture, anything mainstream really. and just wanting that shock value, to whether it's to wake people up or to think differently. She was only 20 years old when she moved to New York City. This was in 1978, to pursue a career in modern dance, but she was singing and playing the guitar and the drums in some rock band. But she rose to solo stardom in 1983, so she would have been 25 years old. It's pretty young. And a year later is when her best-selling album or best-selling song "Like a Virgin" came out. Right, so two of her biggest songs were "Like a Virgin" and "Like a Prayer." "Like a Prayer" is my absolute favorite song of hers. Oh my goodness, watch the video, it is crazy. In terms of, well, just all of it, the religious content and mixed up with, you know, the sexuality within it, but it's an incredible song. And it just reminded me of a quote by Yogananda. Something like 10,000 Christs cannot give you God until you've first made love to him yourself. 10,000 Christs could not give you God until you have first made love to him yourself. And so anyway, "Like a Virgin" reminds me a little of that. Not "Like a Virgin," excuse me, "Like a Prayer." That video, there's some things going on in that are very, well, I mean, just, they just make you, she just does things in a way that wake people up. So anyway, this strong 12th house obviously is just this energy linked with her fame. It was just so massive pretty early on. I wouldn't say fast fame so much, only it appeared to be like fast fame, and it was very enormous and immense. But I see her too as just a soul. Even now, she's starting a tour at, well, how old is she? 63 or something, 1958. How old is that?
That sounds right. 65, something like that, or 55.
She looks
65.
great. I'm sure she may have had some help. I don't know. For a long time, she didn't want to touch any of that, but so she just continues to reinvent herself. Uranus in the 12th house. I mean, there's just no limit to what she can tap into creatively and otherwise. And I think she just inspires other people to just be who they are, just like in my Gaga does in that way. And so what are your thoughts about her?
Well, I'm just noticing for the first time, so she has a Venus separating from a square to the nodes. That Venus in Leo in the 11th it just makes so much sense, knowing her soul, redefining her own sexuality and being her own whole person, and just sort of, she became her own Madonna, her own icon. I mean, it's just helpful to recognize that. So this Uranus and Leo in the 12th house, we've often seen that planets in the 12th house can become symbols of universal symbols or fame. They become representative of something much greater than themselves. This is heightened with Leo in the 12th house, where, you know, you become this like personal symbol of fame or glory or something that is revered by many or hated, right? And then Uranus is also the function that corresponds to a social contagion. She revolutionized the diva archetype with her music, with her style, with her boldness, with her courage, and with her spirituality. She brought into her, and she's known just like Elvis, right? Like, everyone will apprehend the individual according to whatever they're able to access, but there's so much to her. She brought in a lot of spirituality, and actually, as I understand, studied a lot of mysticism and Kabbalah. And so she brings these universal spiritual archetypes and embodies them and works with them a lot in her music. A lot of her lyrics are deeply spiritual. I mean, she does, like, some of her songs are yogic chants and mantras, and her spirituality is very deep and also very universal. So she's taken these universal symbols to unify her own fame, her own power, her own existence itself, becoming a symbol for a greater unification that transcends individual differences. Even, I think, in Like a Prayer at that time, it was like her making making out with a black man or something like that. There's
He's like
certain things
yeah, he's a statue that comes to life. He's inside a church and he comes to life. Yeah.
in the 80s. I mean, just like to recognize in the 80s, that
Yeah,
was pretty
exactly.
bold.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
but 12th house, Uranus, it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. There's a unity of spirit. And the impulse of Uranus anywhere is about liberation. Let's actually define this facet. What are we liberating from with Uranus in the 12th house? We're liberating from the illusion of separation. We're liberating from the dream world of literal symbols, people, bodies, differences. And we're awakening to the inherent unity of all beings, of all creation. And I think this is something that's embodied very much in her boldness, in her courage, in how she lived her life.
You know, I thought that
She's constantly reinventing. Even today, she has a tour on right now. Like
I just said, yeah, she's starting a new tour. She is
yeah,
reinventing herself
constantly
all the time.
reinventing herself. And I should say one more thought, and then I want to hear what you're going to say. The limitation with Uranus is where we get fixed on the symbolism or the metaphor. So there's a sort of innocence and beauty with Uranus and Leo in the 12th house in her free being. And what happens, we get to a point where then we want to return to that innocence or reconnect. Like, I think the innocence here is being at the edge of the unknown, reinventing. And that means letting go of, oh, I was really famous and important and well respected, and I want to try to reconnect with that. There can be a letting go of pride, a letting go of self-importance, and a letting go of there's something important about me as an individual, and an awakening to I'm no different than anyone else. And I think that might be a part of her ongoing soul journey in reconciling with her own humanness. And she isn't special. She is one and the same as every other being. And I can just, I speculate on just that, what that is for her on her ongoing soul journey, to just be what she is and reinventing herself without needing to create something spectacular. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, I always thought Beyonce had sold more records worldwide than anyone, but she has sold over 300 million records worldwide and is the best-selling female recording artist of all time. Amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I was unaware of that. I mean, look,
she's like the grandma of I don't know what the word is, but so many people have just been inspired by what she brought forward into this world.
So Uranus has just come over. It's sitting on her Mars for the final time. So here it is.
Oh, yeah, it's stationing on her Mars, and she's like, another tour, ninth house, going on tour.
International.
Get all this energy.
Is it sold out, the whole thing probably already?
Oh, I imagine. I mean, I want to go to it. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to go to it.
I would love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be so great. So yeah, she's an excellent example of
Our
just
Jupiter's right on my Venus. That's why I love her music. Okay.
I know, it's amazing. All right.
And it's just worth mentioning Carl Sagan. You know, he has Uranus and Aries in the 12th house. He was a proponent in bringing forth forward scientific thinking. He was a skeptic, very scientific, not very woo-woo at all, but also was very objectively open to exploring the possibility of there being life on other planets. That's very Uranus in the 12th house. In fact, it rules the 10th house. If you think of the 10th house as being the boundaries of this planet, or like the boundaries of human consciousness as it relates to, like, I'm a human, I'm an earthling, and there's nothing else out there. You want to liberate from that in the same way that, you know, you can be in a country and realize, oh, there are people outside of this country. You can be on the earth and realize we're just one global community from a greater galactic federation of communities, and we shouldn't just exclude ourselves from this greater possibility. So he was very well known for that, and the research and what he's created around that, but also being very scientific. He spoke a lot about global warming, greenhouse effect, was a very big proponent for that kind of awareness. And just Uranus and Aries in the 12th house, very individuated stage soul, forward future thinking, the environment, the collective human species, the earth we're living on, that which is beyond the earth. And he squares the nodes too. So to me, this is also a prime example of a soul that in the past, Uranus and Aries and 12, forward thinking, new ideas, bringing it forward into the world. And then it's actually ruled by Mars in Virgo with Neptune in the 5th house. Here you're putting something forward and it squares the nodes, North Node, Aquarius, 10th house. The mainstream society says that isn't allowed. That's not okay.
That's
I can just, what's that?
That's outlandish.
Right. I can just imagine in the past, and I don't know this empirically, that I wouldn't be surprised if he was one of those many astronomer type people in the medieval ages that, said something and then, was persecuted for that. Just classic example, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the pioneering spirit here, and just not getting credit where credit is due. Ultimately, that's the Mars Virgo, balsamic to Neptune. It was kind of like one of these souls that probably got credit long after he passed and left the world. I mean, I think
most Iranian people do.
Yeah, and I think that's been true in this life. He's very celebrated in many ways after the fact, but that's a classic signature for people waking up to what he had discovered or what he was sharing long after he was gone.
Yeah. It's worth noting Uranus in the 12th house. I see two groups of people, both in just my readings and just overall exposure. You could have people that are just so almost like they're not spiritually oriented at all. It's like life is what you can see and measure scientifically. I don't believe in any of this woo. Everything can be explained in scientific, and it's like science, whatever science is, because science is different in every era. Science is it. Versus people where it's like, yeah, I woke up and I had a conversation with Mary Magdalene and I'm channeling deities and I realized that there's a galactic federation of light beings that are working with me to help enlighten the grids in various parts of the planet to awaken the Merkaba. And it's just like two totally different like orientations. Just wanted to share that.
Exactly. I agree. I would say too, like a real scientific type, and this is where you think about well, you got a lot going on over there today. We got sirens,
construction behind our house.
Anyway, this is when you really start to think about the stage of evolution for any soul with that Uranus placement, right? Like, what are they calling in? And the one thing astronomers cannot answer or cannot solve or come up with is an equation for creation.
Right.
Possible. This is where they reach their limit. So this is where that interface of when evolution is going to have to take place for those souls. So because there is a limit to where the mind can go, and there is no equation for creation. So
just reminds me of that core piece where science falls short. There's such a focus on the observations, but the thing that is often not met or explored is the observer, like the one looking through the telescope. And that's where the Uranus observation, depending on our level of consciousness, will reflect with Uranus the level of intelligence from which we're able to observe. And there's always this space to step even further back and look at the one looking, and then look at that one,
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Well, this completes our Uranus in the 12th house series. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful tour, and thank you for being on this journey with me, Ari.
Thank you as well, Kristin.